I'm out loud and proud as a North Belfastian tonight, and it's one of the reasons why I am standing in front of you this evening. I grew up in North Belfast, but I grew up on an interface in North Belfast, or by an interface. There were lots of interfaces in North Belfast, lots of physical interfaces, but the interface that I grew up on was one that ran down invisibly along the street that I lived. On one side of the street, it was mostly Catholic families, and on the street side that I lived on, it was mostly Protestant families. But I went to two schools in North Belfast, two very important schools to me. Both are where I would consider integrated, long before there was such a term as an integrated education or integrated school. So I'm a huge advocate for us moving forward with integrated education. But my primary school and my secondary school had Muslims, Catholics, Protestants and Jews in it, and I know that that formed a lot of the opinions and the wide beliefs that I have today. I also went to Brownies, that wonderful institution. I went to Brownies in a Presbyterian church hall every Saturday morning, without fail. I loved it. We went on camp together, we did everything. I was a leader, I was the sixer of the Pixies. But the thing that made our Brownies stand out was there was more Catholic Brownies than Protestant Brownies attending that Presbyterian church hall. I felt very strongly that I wanted to do something that was going to be different. And I found that one day when I was just 9 years old. My cousin, who was studying German at Queen's University, the first person in our family to actually go to university and study a degree. And she took me to a day out. So we got on the bus from North Belfast into the centre of town, and the bus from the centre of town up to South Belfast to this beautiful place. And as I walked around the art galleries and the various other history, science, archaeology, world cultures collection, I knew at that stage that I wanted to work at the Ulster Museum. Now, how was I going to do that? I didn't know anybody who worked in the museum. I didn't know anybody who was, had ever worked in that sort of cultural practice. But I was very lucky. I was gifted at art, and I won a place at the Art College in Belfast. Now, again, this is the height of mid-80s. Not a particularly pleasant place to be studying. Most of my counterparts at school had fled to London or Bristol or Birmingham or Scotland or wherever to study, but I stayed home because I loved Belfast. And the Art College, I worked every time I had the opportunity to go as a volunteer to the museum to help some of the curators there put up exhibitions, and I learnt about the collection. In fact, I learned so much about the collection that in 1995, sure enough, I was lucky. The person that I had been volunteering to, he retired, and I was able to take over his post. So I was a curator of applied art, and I was over the moon. And to this day, which is nearly 25 years later, I still think I have the best job in the world. I have the best people I work with and the best objects that I work with. And art is my subject, art is my field. And when I arrived in the museum, I was the youngest curator, and the youngest curator by a lot, because they hadn't employed anybody for a very, very long time. It was always known as you walked into dead man's shoes in the museum business. And I knew I loved art, and I came from this, working class background up in North Belfast, and even my headmistress had said to me at school, if you do A-level art, you will come to nothing. You have to do science. So Miss McElroy, I'm actually here. So I loved the idea that art should be accessible to everybody. And a lot of people are fearful of art. They think that art is something that you have to know a bit about. Or I wouldn't go into that gallery because there's funny paintings with no images on them, they're just one colour. That's okay. You can walk into those galleries, and if you don't like the paintings, you can say that. I really believe that everybody should have an opinion about art, and in fact you do. All of you do. Every day you have an opinion about art, whether you actually are conscious of it or not. When you pick up your coffee mug out of the cupboard in the morning that you pour your coffee into, you made a conscious decision at some point to pick the design, that mug, over some other mug that was sitting in IKEA or whatever. You put, pieces of art on your walls, whether it is, again, a print from IKEA or it's from a Shishi gallery on the Lisburn Road, or it's the wonderful fingerprints of your 2-year-old from nursery. You've made conscious decisions about art. When you close your curtains, when you go to sleep at night, the curtains were designed and manufactured by somebody who no doubt had gone to art college. So you make choices about art all the time. But when I joined the museum, it became very apparent that art was still seen as elitist. So I knew that we had to change that perception and make it accessible to everybody. And I've been doing exhibitions a lot. But in recent years, 2 things changed: myself and how the museum has delivered art to the public. And these were 2 specific exhibitions. Art of the Troubles was the largest scale exhibition to date that showed how artists had responded to our 30-year period of conflict. This exhibition was groundbreaking. We were fearful at the time of doing it, and it has changed my life. Not just working with the artists, but working with organisations like WAVE, Trauma Centre, who look after the victims and survivors of the Troubles. That exhibition was visited alongside another exhibition which I curated the year after in 2015, which was called Silent Testimony. Silent Testimony, you may have heard of this artist, Colin Davidson. His portrait of Eamon Holmes was just unveiled this week. He has painted the Queen, he's painted Brad Pitt, he has painted Bill Clinton. And he took some time out to paint 18 portraits of people who suffered loss during the Troubles. Those 2 exhibitions were visited by over 120,000 people. Now, in terms of Northern Ireland, that is huge. The people that came into the gallery were not people who would normally visit the Ulster Museum art galleries. They were people that were coming to see whether we were actually telling them or letting them see their story of the Troubles. The wonderful thing that we had with the exhibitions, we were able to get feedback from the public, and they wrote really emotional outpourings about the things that had affected them or their families. And we knew that we were doing something right. We could see people having conversations with their teenagers who had no first-hand experience of the Troubles. They were pointing out how we lived with security barriers and, the surveillance that we thought was normal. The other thing was that roughly 50-50 people turned around and said, well, you've obviously curated this with a Republican idea in mind. And the other 50% said, well, you've obviously curated this with a loyalist sensibility. So we knew we'd done something right. As I said, on the back of that exhibition, we knew it was a way that people could have difficult conversations, and no more so than silent testimony. When we put the paintings on the walls, there are 18 people. We don't say what their background was, how the loss occurred, whether it was sectarian violence or state. Whether it was personal loss, etc. It was such an emotional exhibition, something that we have now toured around the world because it has allowed people to actually think about what we live with now. These 18 people live with this loss right now. So people were reacting to it in such a way, the actual gallery became nearly church-like. People went round and read everybody's story that was beside the paintings. And we now know that art is something that we have to explore more, how we can relate it to how this community moves forward. As I said, we had a huge response. People wrote, and I just wanted to add this very poignant piece line that was just put in on one of our feedback forms, and it means so much to me because the public understood what we were trying to do and what we're continuing to try and do. And they wrote, art can be the most amazing way of saying things that words and politics can't. And I thought that was really very important for us to move forward with more of these types of exhibitions that allows the public to see how the artists and how we can feel about that art. Thank you.